Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox. Today we're going to talk about my observations after having what I consider to be a full-fledged strike team. There are going to be a number of different variations for strike teams, even 140 level strike teams that will be available now and in the future. But I think that there are some notable 120 units that could make it well in this team, especially in certain suitable niches. There's also, you could go heavier on wind and go with a Tifa. There's a lot of ways that you could potentially do this, but this is the one that I've settled on, and I want to talk about its matchups. Now, again, the joy for me of this paradigm being a little bit plug and play, there are obvious best units, just like any element. There are best strike units in the same way that there are best wind units or whatever. But at the same time, I think that the other have their niches, and that this is a bit more plug and play in terms of elemental composition than anything we have seen since maybe the first year of this game. So I'm glad that we finally gotten to the point where we can also build teams a little bit the way that we did prior to the elemental meta, but the elemental meta still exists and is still competitive, and that's really cool because we're having our cake and eating it too. So let's talk about my notes for my particular team, which is probably the more dominant strike team that is available at this moment. That's going to be Edward, Alphonse, and Perrine. So that's a wind unit, a lightning unit, and a water unit. And a couple of these units, like Alphonse and Perrine specifically, put in so much work for this team that it kind of automatically gives them at least in arena, it gives them a good edge against their counter elements. For example, Perrine is pretty good herself at doing a lot of damage to fire teams. The one unit, by the way, that I'm consistently having trouble with this team on fire teams is Roy Mustang. I think that Kefka might be a curveball for this team moving into the future. It might be a good way to shore yourself up against these teams, and a lot of that is because this team wants to fight an almost purely physical team because Alphonse is ridiculously tanky against physical units. His matchup is a bit more even against newer units. So a unit like Bradley could really give you trouble with his more modern penetrations, but also the fact that he's an Earth unit. That being said, if it's an all-Earth team, if it's an all-Earth physical team, if there's not, say, a Queen Macherie, then this team still has actually a pretty good matchup. Because while Alphonse does take a good bit of damage from Bradley and can be chained down by the other partners, even though he kind of resists elemental chaining, that helps him survive through being chained down. That gives the team enough time to get Edward in place, and with his guaranteed hit adamantine pillar transmutation, he's bringing Earth units pretty consistently down to their courage. He only needs his brother to distract for long enough to do that, and Alphonse is just stubborn enough of a tank that he can get ganged up on by Earth units, provided that they are physical, and actually survive for long enough to set up his brother. You do kind of have to sacrifice Al for that, but the fact that they can go into even more modern Earth compositions and win is pretty impressive. They tend to be good against missile in general, although there are specific matchups to mention. Obviously, magic missile, anything with one of the Jadens or Energists is going to be problematic for them. Although they probably have more resistances here than they would against maybe some of the base kit from Roy Mustang. I believe he's also an Energist as a sub-job, so they would be able to resist his more magic missile moves, but he's not going to use those against them because of that. His AI is already going to avoid doing that and use its more effective moves. This team tanks water beautifully. I mean, probably not even necessarily water physical, but just water in general for the most part. There is a bit more variance here because Alphonse does have the backup of having high water resistance, So he can actually take on some of the more magical teams. Now, you aren't going to want a pure water magic team to match up against, but there are a number of advantages against water, and one of those is going to be Celeste. Celeste is amazingly weak to strike, and even if people build her for defense, often no one is building her for strike resistance, and how would you even do that? So she's going to get punched the fuck out real quick. It doesn't even have to be Alphonse that does it. Literally anyone on this team can one-shot Celeste, I'm pretty fucking sure. And honestly, Alphonse is the weakest member of the team, so the fact that he can one-shot Celeste and probably restore about a third of his HP while he's doing it, that's pretty impressive. Good boy. So you can definitely tank water, and then you can also dish out pretty decent damage, especially to water's tank, regardless of who you are. And then Alphonse with things like Boulder, whatever, his AoE attacks, he's going to be able to do decent damage to them, but they're all going to get smacked. It stomps on fire, which doesn't necessarily mean, again, if we've got Roy Mustang, if we've got good magic units, they can cut through this team rather quickly. But at the same time, Perrine's going to cut through them rather quickly right back. So while there are a lot of winning fire matchups, even fire evasion matchups, it's not as safe once you start running Roy Mustang, because, you know, the question is, does he do his damage before or after he gets vortex kicked? Because if he does his damage, well, he's not going to be doing damage after a vortex kick. That's pretty much what I'm getting at here. So it can be kind of a fiery matchup in a lot of ways. It's going to be quick and painful for both of you. Although I would say again that often, now, there are definitely certain maps and scenarios where there are AoE fire strategies, such as specific, I got my ass handed to me by a Sweetheart Ildira fire combo team that just beat down my entire team. You can still be weak to that kind of stuff, but at the same time, if you get a move in and they bunch at all, Perrine is going to vortex kick the living fuck out of their entire team, and it will be glorious. So it's a very explosive matchup, I would say. You may have noticed that some of the teams that I've kind of mentioned it being good against so far are ones that do run evasion. I'm not saying that evasion is the most common thing for the Bradley team. I think that his most common partner is probably Queen Macherie, and she's really the thing that this team does the worst against, probably in general. But you will know that fire and earth, especially the fire and earth physical variants that I am trying to fight more often with this team, are more often themselves evasion teams. And this team handles evasion pretty well. I'm not saying that it's incredibly accurate, and in fact it can have some trouble with Yuffie, although a lot of times it can outlast Yuffie's buff well enough that it's not too big of a trouble. But while individually I would say that all of these characters don't have a great evasion matchup, once you get all of them together, the fact that they all have single target guarantee, or, well, I mean, technically it's single target, even though it allows you to choose up to 2 or 3. 2, I think. You know, single target guaranteed hit moves, those really stack up and make this team pretty good at dealing with evasion. And, like, I have often seen it get into a situation where the evasion will push out damage really quickly, or units will get into a bad situation. Say Edward brings Catone down to courage, but then can't follow through to take her out, and he gets pinged out by Drain Force. All sorts of scenarios like that, where often Alphonse survives through it all, and because his guaranteed hit also restores his HP, it puts him in a really good position as the lone survivor to just be able to tank through an evasion unit pretty well. And if he can't beat them by accumulating the AP to do his armored flash kick or whatever it is, then he can definitely stand around and take their shit for a while, especially if he has healer support. As I've noted before, the Earth matchup is really about avoiding Queen Macherie. King Bradley is a bit of a threat, and I think Oberon could be a little bit of trouble for kind of similar reasons to both of them. But if you focus on more purely physical matchups with Earth, which is pretty easy to do, they aren't as known for their mages in that there's really only 3 of them that are UR, so not much to be known for. Compared to other elements, that is a really abysmally low number. So you have a lot of good Earth matchups, but I think better Earth teams today are running Queen Macherie. I think she's one of the most important Earth units, other than Bradley, obviously, but like the most important second part of that team that's available now. And the third part is definitely going to be the Aldo when he comes, and that team is going to do really well, I think, against especially this variation on the Strike team. But against the myriad Earth physical matchups, I think the Strike team does pretty well, even though the tank is technically elementally weak to the entire team. He can resist them chaining on him, which they will love to do, and just generally resist everything else about them. Light is not a thing I tested, so I just put a big question mark next to that in my notes. The reason is that Light has a lot of advantages in Arena right now, and I wouldn't really be able to tell, I think, like, how much of that, like, I don't know. Because many of these matchups in Arena were pretty close, so like I think that the thing that would, push Light over the edge might be the buffs that they have. Maybe that takes our units out just a little bit sooner, and that causes them to us not to be able to power through. I mean, who knows? Ice matchups. Okay, so this is a lot like Earth. The ice matchup is a little bit shaky, but especially against physical ice, you have a good matchup. Snow is a little bit of a problem for the physical ice team. 1, because he gets into decent defense penetration, but 2, because he's not a missile unit. Missile and slash resistance are pretty good for this team, but typically, and I'm not exactly sure how this team stacks up for this, just haven't looked at it, but typically a lot of strike units also end up being weak to strike. So him being a strike tank, who I think is also weak to strike, but he's also a tank. So for similar reasons to Alphonse being able to make it through Earth, he can make it through your strike units. That kind of gives him a good matchup against your team, and especially against Edward, which is trouble. But the ranged units, so long as they don't pick on Edward, and being ranged units, they're generally always in range of Alphonse. If you can get them to just try to ping Alphonse to death between his defense and his barriers and his chain resistance, his ability to heal himself by kicking people, as long as he has hate on him to keep his brother safe, and he doesn't like wander into AoE range somehow, then you're gonna have a really, really effective matchup against them. But that also kind of puts a clock on you needing to get people out there. Often Perrine can power through this matchup, because even if Alphonse goes down, that gives her enough time to go to these units' face, and she doesn't even need special techniques to do this. She can just upsurge to one and then use the CT up to go after the other. Or she could just run up next to them and punch them in the side of the head and they're dead. Like, it's not hard. You really kind of need... Alphonse in this case is kind of a Trojan horse. You get everybody to... we aren't literally hiding inside of him, which is a possibility, not theoretically, in that he has an empty suit of armor. Not really a thing we can do in-game, but moving on. In general, physical, yes. Magic, no. Wind physical, I tested against this because it has a neutral matchup against literally everything I've got. Didn't lose a single match. That was a pretty much a sure thing. Dark physical, better, but there's a lot of penetrations there. There's a lot of nasty stuff there. That is a harder physical matchup to win, especially because of units like Sephiroth. But it's arguably more winnable than a lot of the Earth matchups, even some of the Earth physical matchups that this team has had. The problem is that I really find with Dark is powerful, really penetrating slash attacks, which has always kind of been their thing, and putting out a lot of damage in AoEs, and when you combine those things, it can push them just over the damage threshold, because units like Edward, like whether they survive the opening volley or not, can be a huge impact on the rest of the fight, because if they get one hit in there with like adamantine pillar transmutation, if they can get in close enough to do that, it's a game changer. Same for Perrine. If she can get close enough to vortex kick, that's gonna often come close to wiping a team. The problem is that if you get wiped first, you can't do that, and Dark is just really good at doing that. In that respect, you could, and there are a lot of ways to do this, honestly, you could focus a bit more on AoE resistance on this team, and you might actually have a pretty damn good matchup against pure Dark physical teams. But really, you would want to focus on that AoE resistance, is probably where I would go with that. But again, most of these units already have buffs for that. I'm not sure who you would switch out for him. He is unfortunately only a 120 unit, but he is viable, acceptable. I don't have him at 120 yet, or I would test him on this team, but Raldor seems like a really good choice. And I say that because I think that as a tank, he makes an even better anti-missile unit, especially against ice for sure, than Alphonse. Yeah, I guess. But I think if you're hunting ice missile, you might be able to go with Perrine, Alphonse, Raldor, and just kind of use him more as a threat, more as a brawler, and give him the time to get in their faces, or maybe even use Alphonse more as a brawler. I don't know, like you have ways to go, because I really think if the team closes the gap, and having those two units there pretty much ensures that you would against ice physical, then yeah, I think this could be a really good matchup for taking that. I don't think it probably weakens your matchup into water very much, because that was really secure to begin with. But that being said, Raldor is probably really weak to water magic, in that he seems to spec more into physicality in general, as most strike units do, but also his resistances are very heavily stacked in that direction. There's no way they give magic resistance or spirit to a unit like that, so he probably has a negative, if anything. The other way you could go is snow. I just flat out don't have snow on my strike account, and that might be worth going for, especially with the pixel, during pixel remaster, I guess. But it seems like a lot of an investment, I guess, for. I mean, he is a good unit, and like he's one of the units that's really proved himself over time, so I don't feel bad going for him. But overall, here are my thoughts. The power of this team is its elemental flexibility, its ability to do variations on itself. Oh shit, Uriel, oh, that's right. Okay, lightning matchups. My bad. How did I... Yeah. Oh no, it is on here. Shit, I just missed it. Okay, so lightning matchups are pretty good against lightning physical. Sometimes if you run into a team with a lot of slash penetration, that can be a little bit of a problem. sometimes builds of Cloud can be a problem. It just depends on how quickly they get through Alphonse. Usually I have a lot of trouble with that, and you can use that to your advantage. The fact that they can also get through, so what happens is, after Alphonse goes down, Perrine goes down fairly quickly. She can kind of tank through some stuff, but if she gets unlucky, she falls rather quickly to lightning. That being said, she does pretty good damage against them, and Edward has a neutral matchup, so he's doing fine, although he's Cloud-like in a lot of ways. Alright, Woodpecker, don't you fucking ruin this for me. But the Skahal matchup is pretty bad. It's pretty abysmal. Yep, pretty fucking terrible. Just saying. So, if you want a team that's just really good anti-physical, really good brawlers, a team that is flexible enough to fuck with just about anybody, even if it doesn't consistently win fights in a lot of different directions, but maybe something that has more niches. Oh, he's looking in every little hole in that dead tree. Sorry, distracted. In my defense, it's a red-headed woodpecker, and it is right past my eye line for the microphone. It's kind of hard not to notice it when it moves. But overall, this is a really flexible composition. It does well against a lot of things. That being said, it doesn't... What am I trying to say here? It doesn't have anything that it excels at incredibly, and it might be easily defeatable once people learn how to counter it. And really from this video, though, the way that you counter it on defense is really just run magic at it. You're probably good. Earth magic especially will melt through Alphonse, although you might not walk into that fight with the privilege of knowing that their tank is Alphonse. If I had Alphonse as my tank, I would probably put him in slot 2 or even 3 with Edward up front, just so they don't try to run an element that would be disadvantageous for my Alphonse. Not sure. I might put Perrine up front, but I think that Edward up front would actually be smarter for that team. Just to kind of hopefully throw people off a bit. Especially because like an ice missile team, like an ice physical team that you might try to run here, assuming that this is a wind physical team and that you can take them out at a distance, that would be particularly disadvantaged against the rest of the team. Especially if you have a Raldor hiding in there. And, let's see. Alright, Raldor does not have a 140 yet in JP. So he's not getting any better anytime soon. That fucking sucks, but, still pretty good, although like kind of in his niche, and I think that he's a really good unit to put behind Edward if you're using Edward at the front of your bait team. If you're doing strike, I think that they have a good synergy and that he's probably worth building. Also, for the reasons that I noted before, I think if you are hunting strike, maybe a good way to go is ice magic with a snow up front. That might actually be really good. That's probably one of the more consistent ways to do it. That deals with Edward, that deals with Alphonse. It has a little bit of trouble with Raldor, but I think it might be able to power through that. I'm not sure how well it would take damage from Raldor, but he's not necessarily a DPS, so it may not matter that much. But another big way to go would probably be using Queen Macherie and in the future Dialdo against them. That seems like it would be really good as a 1-2 magical punch. Although I think Queen Macherie is going to be a lot better against this team than Dialdo will be, because they have a slightly different relationship to piercing in general that might make that a bit more mitigable than mitigable. See, I can't say it the other way. Mitigatable. No, that does not sound right. Mitigable. Fuck, what did I say before though? I think he might be able to tank it better is what I'm saying. God damn. Because here's my thoughts for a strike team. First of all, you probably want a tank. Somebody who can tank for your team. Literally someone who generates hate, no bullshit with like fucking... They have to have hate. They have to have a good bit of hate. Here's why. Because you have short range. You need to close in, and you need somebody durable to take hits until you can. If you can close in, you are far more likely to win against basically anybody, because you do a lot of damage to a lot of people. But on the other hand, if you can't close in without your tank dying first, you're running a real good chance of losing the match, because then you can just get picked off. And if your tank can ultimately survive the match, well, that's just great. And again, there are a lot of range strategies that don't necessarily work against Strike, because Strike has a lot of innate resistances to missile, which is helpful, at least in those matchups, for it being able to close the gap. However, there are other teams that are a bit more long range, certain mages and certain piercing units that can actually throw them some trouble. And also, like, large AoE damage on slash attacks. If you have a diamond, that is effectively increasing your range by like 2 or 3. So sometimes those moves can be used to pick them off, but you can fight a bit of that with AoE resistance and prioritizing AoE resistance on the team and in their buff patterns. So that is one that is more mitigable. There it is. There's the word. I said it right. So let's end this on a high note. I learned how to say mitigable in this video, and there we are. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has definitely been more of a passion project. I'm excited for a viable rainbow team that has interchangeable parts that all work really well. There's some really cool strike units and some niches in which this team is ridiculously strong, and I absolutely love it. So even if it has kind of mixed results and maybe might be a little bit more counterable than I enjoy on defense, I'm so excited for this team. And if you're excited too, and if you appreciate me getting excited about this and making this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I know it sounds silly, I know it's a dumb YouTuber thing, but look, people don't do it if you don't ask. Like, there has been a lot of empirical data that has demonstrated this. Please, I am begging you, like this video. You watched this long. Look, you gave me this much of your time. You're still listening to me right now. Oh, you have all the time in the world to click that like button. I don't care if you're watching it on your TV. I often don't like YouTube videos because I watch them on my TV, and it's not right there. It's not convenient. But look, it just takes a couple seconds. Just do the like. Just do the like. And hey, are you subscribed? You should do that too. Now, this is harder on a TV, but look in my description. You'll find links to Patreon and Ko-fi. If you'd like to support this channel even more, you can send money in that way. Also, there's a link to my Discord. If you just want to hang out and chat, I would be happy to have you. We're also going to be doing wotv tournaments and tournament-style events in the future, open to all and hopefully balanced so that everyone can enjoy themselves and find fun competition. With all of that being said, see you in the next one.